Alright, so interestingly enough, I'm a night person, like the night owl, some people call it, and it's not really the case this past evening. It's like 6:30 in the morning right now, on a Saturday, and I am awake, and I am like, let's get to work. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to get this dash, put it in here, we're going to get it screwed in, and then we'll worry about everything else later, the wiring and all that kind of stuff. But I'm going to wipe all this down, make it nice and clean, because all the stuff is settled in here, and then we will show you putting this thing back in. And I have the screws somewhere. Oh, here they are. Right here. Remember when we took this thing apart? And I'll put a little card up here so you can check that out if you missed it. Showing us removing the dash and putting all the stuff in this tray. So just join in on the fun of this. Maybe you'll learn something. Maybe you won't. Oh, yeah, look, the dash is in. Please don't mind the dash pad. I did clean it up and just laid it in there. It's not mounted in. It's just kind of give me the perception of what's there when it will be done. So because I kind of miss seeing a dash in there. Like, look at that. We put the defrost vents in, repainted them. Also, I did a lot of touch-up, clean-up on the knobs. So I did the black back inside of here. Very, very small paintbrush. And then I hit it with some SEM clear, like a satin finish, clear, like a lacquer. Same thing with a wiper, even the cigarette lighter. All of these right here. So your defrost, all that kind of situation. Cleaned all the chroma for the ignition. And I've spent most of the morning doing that. Now, we got all the screws in. This one kind of fought me here. These two, you saw that. And it was a matter of just getting everything to kind of wiggle into place. This was really out of line, and I was able to get it down enough, and the bolt slips up in there, no problem now. No interference from the dash itself. And then, of course, getting all these hooked up into that was a big deal. So probably what I'm going to do next is this wiring here. And most of this, well, actually all of this is for the engine forward wiring. So I'm going to go through and inspect everything, clean it up, degrease it. It looks like we might have a a break right there. So stuff like that I'm going to address and fix it. And then, like I said, clean it all up. There's a lot of years of dirt on here, make it look nice and pretty. And run it forward along the clips and everything, and get it back out here to where it runs up to the bulkhead that will be on the dash side, and get that all back in place. All these looms will hold all that in, and we'll plug everything back up. And then I'm taking a break from that. We'll get back to that, and you'll see that in the other videos. And so I'm just going to get everything ready to go, so that will be the least of our problems. And then from there, I'll tell you what I want to do. The engine cover that goes on here, I'd like to clean that up, but it needs some fiberglass repairs, and we can get into that. I don't know when I'll do it, whether it be soon. I'd like to do it soon, but not sure when, because I'd like to rebuild the carburetor. So we have different directions we can go in here. Now the steering column, I haven't forgotten about that. I have it laying over here on the trash can right now. Let's see, oh yeah, I need to get the bushing here back inside there and run the screws in it. But I think there's a little, it needs some persuasion to get it far enough in there. So I'll have to fool with that. And before I go too far with it, we're going to decide what to do here. And I think I'm going to look up and see if I can get a new one. If I can't, then we will reuse this one, clean it up, resplice it back together, and put it in the column, and so on and so forth. Now this is a seal for the coupler on the steering box, okay? So at the end of your steering column, you'll have this. Well, this is in good shape, but this, you can see it's broken up. You can get these about anywhere. For instance, eBay, $8 for a brand new one. And some of them have kits where you get this piece with it, and you get a clamp, and there's different prices. But if you just need the seal, you should be able to only pay about $8 for that. This seal cleaned up really good, so we can reuse that for that assembly, but that's at the end. And this is just a little wire chase that goes when the steering column is in place, and it'll allow this wiring to kind of be hidden as it goes up into the dash. Clean this stuff up. A lot of cleanup, just a lot of touch-up kind of stuff, and just moving on from there. So hopefully we can also get the instrument cluster put back together, although I don't know when that'll go back in. I do need some of the clips, the little nylon clips, so you can run your screws in there. Some of those are missing, and I need to get some new ones or old ones or something. And I'm also going to mock up a bracket for the radio. Since this did not originally have a radio, there's no bracket in there, and you need something to support the back of it as it weighs down. The bezel that goes in here is just plastic, and it screws into that. It has a metal frame on the aftermarket radio, although vintage. We do need to put something in the back, and I believe it is anchored off of up in here somewhere, maybe off of the maybe one of the defrost vent stubs or something there. Actually, if you look in the service manual, it shows you exactly what it is, so I'll just base it off of that probably, and we will just go from there. So when I get into that, all right, so it's getting pretty hot here, so I'm just trying to get the fan on me and sit down here and clean this wiring up. As you can see, this is nice and black. It's not all covered in dirt, and it needs a little bit more kind of a touch-up work on it. Mainly just, maybe not so much elbow grease, but thumb grease. I went over this using our wax and tar remover, and that took 80 to 90% of it off. And as you can see what it was looking like, it was just, you know, pretty dirty, dusty. This is the original loom. It even has the old part number thing on it, which is about ready to fall off. I'm just going to take that off. Might take it on later. I don't know. And I have cleaned up the connector here. Now, as you can see all the colors of the wires. It was mildly distinguishable earlier, and that was just, you know, shop rag and just carefully working out, not separating the wires too heavily. You know, you might have to even twist it a little bit one way, and it kind of opens them up, and you can wipe them out. For the really stubborn stuff, Like for instance, on this connector, it was all caked in these little crevices and cracks, and where you depress that, I just use a little bit of carb cleaner. A good one to use also is if you are hitting the connector inside, use the electric cleaner, which has the same kind of property of the carb or a brake cleaner. It dries really quick, and you can clean stuff out, spray things down really good, and wash it all out. And there was a lot of soot up in here, so I got that connector in pretty good shape. I think part of that is broken, but I ain't got to worry about too much. They do click in really tight. So we're going to go through and do the rest of these connectors. But mostly you can do these old wiring harnesses if they still have the wrap on them, which is not electrical tape, by the way. It's actually a non-adhesive wrap. This will clean a lot of stuff up really well. And as I said, we're going to inspect for any breakages. It looks like this one has broken, or else they spliced a new piece on, a new pigtail, because it's got some shrink on it, which is good, and they probably did that correctly. So we'll leave that one, just clean it up, and just take our time to go through all this wiring like this. And it's actually not too big of a job. I did from basically this edge here all the way to here in about 5-6 minutes, something like that. And then you can just go through and kind of fine tune if you're real picky about it, and make it look almost new. So I'm just going to go through, spin a little bit, and this is the main harness for the engine, I believe, and yeah, because it's got the alternator and all that stuff on it, relay. And I also have the other two connectors for the bulkhead, and it's got like the windshield wiper pump on it, and other little things like the heater and that sort of thing. I'm going to clean that up. It's actually a separate harness. So I'm going to go through that, and I'll show you how clean we got it, and I'll probably even run it up through there and have it done. Here's one of the wiring harnesses that was on there. It's not a part of the engine harness so much. It's like the light harness and some of the other accessories on there. But I've got it all cleaned up, and see, it almost looks like new. This all was original. It's almost 50 years old, and it cleaned up really, really good. Just with the carb cleaner and a lot of the wax and tar remover, and just a little bit of finger grease, like elbow grease. So anything that had a situation, a break in it, I put this piece of yellow tape on. And this one here, if you notice, it wasn't a wire break, it was actually the terminal inside. I thought it looked a little rusty, so I poked at it, see if I could scrape it loose, and it actually just broke the connector. So we're gonna have to replace this pigtail on it. And as far as I could tell, this was the worst of this harness here. And these cleaned up good. This is almost the original color. They would be right where my thumb is, and they yellow over time, but they cleaned up good. They had a lot of gunk in them and stuff like that. Now we can also see the color of the wires, and we cleaned up, actually need to clean that one up, so put a little 220 sandpaper on this where it connects, and it kind of freshens that terminal up. But otherwise, this turned out really good. This is like your headlight wiring here. Yes, right here. This one, and this is like your side markers. And yeah, this is the other headlight. So you can see how it stretches around. That would be near the driver's side, where that hole is right there. Okay. Now the other part, which is still partially connected to the transmission, it had several more breaks in it. So this one cleaned up really good. And all of this, here's the old splices that somebody else did a good job of here. And all of that. Now, here's where we have some problems on here. We got some of the yellow tape on here. This one here, this one's broken off right at the connector. And I think I've got one of these somewhere. I will look, but it is almost completely snapped off right there. And I think that's for the temperature on the intake. Okay, this one here has just a basic wire break here, so we'll cut it back a little bit, put a splice in there where the fresh metal, or fresh part of the wire is, and that should be good. Let's see, there was another one here somewhere. Oh, right here, I just passed it. Right here we have one that's broke right at the connector, and so I just taped it. So I have some of these, and here's where you want to keep all your old wiring, or if you run into a situation where you have old terminals, especially these old factory ones, cut them up and keep them if you can't take the whole harness, especially if the harness is like broken down anyways. So right here, I've had some of this stuff for a long time. I got single and the little double connectors, and the double ones are like this. I don't have any of those on this harness, and that's cool, but I got various ones of these. Some of them have 2 wires, some of them are a heavier gauge wire, and you know, I even have some longer strands if we need it, and most of those have 2 sections out of them, and I got the more box style. So it's always good to keep stuff like that for situations exactly like this. So I got these, which I'm just going to take the old tape loose and probably take this white one here, and that will replicate the exact same connector we have here, and we can replace it, have a fresh wire on it, or at least a much better wire, and we're good to go on that. I went ahead and got some of these splices. They're the weatherproof ones where if you heat them up, they have like a goo that surrounds the wire, and that helps you out big time. So it's the smallest ones I had, 22 to 18 gauge. So those are good. And then we just picked up a little basic vinyl. It is electrical tape. They didn't have the friction fit style, which is what we would really want to use. But I have just a small strand on that one right there, out there, that you probably can't see because of the light. But we're going to wrap a little bit on there because it was pretty much falling off. Couldn't get it to stay back on. So we'll get this out of the way, cut this and have it ready, and do all our splices and our fixes, and we should be ready to install it right back into the van. Okay, so you notice we've been putting the instrument cluster back together, and I took it apart just last week, so I'm still pretty fresh on how it went together, so that's a good thing. I do have it on video, but being fresh like that, that's a good way you can get your turnaround time and not have it set for so long you forget if you don't take pictures or anything like that. You saw me painting these because they had faded so bad, and I'm sorry that I can't really focus very good for some reason with this, but we've refreshed those and just carefully hand painted it. And I just used it's like an acrylic water-based paint you can get at Hobby Lobby, and it's just an orange. It's pretty close, like a pumpkin color. So I used that, and I was looking at these centers, and a lot of the Dodges back in the late 60s used their little 3-point star, much like you'd see on the hubcaps that I got, if you're familiar with those, that little triangle. Well, I'll show you here in a second. I thought, well, that would be cool to customize it just a little touch and put that back in there, because I was looking at this one. I thought, well, here's the time to do it. So what I got is this right here. Okay, So I did about 4 of them just to have me some backups. You're gonna need 2 of them for sure. And I went ahead and did another printout of these. Now this is on the clear paper, which is what I meant to do these on originally. Now I might redo the indicator on the one I already did and put the clear back on it. Now I could still squeeze it in there with the part of the column back together. It'll be a little hard, but I think I might actually appreciate it a little bit more. So that's just a little trial and error thing. But this needs I put 2 coats of our clear acrylic on there, and 1 more coat, let it set about 10 minutes, and then I will cut them out. And although you don't have to be necessarily neat because it is a clear background, try to be kind of even if you do cut it out, because you might see just a hint of the line where you cut it. Not always, or not usually really, but just try to be neat in what you're doing there. Okay, so we are ready for our decals, and I don't want to make a big watery mess here due to the nature of, you know, the finish. It's old on here and all that, but here is one of the decals. I've kind of trimmed it out, and I got 2 of those, and they intend to go right here in the center. So I've got my little pail of water here, and we're just going to submerge it just like you would any water decal, about that long, you know, 10 seconds. Pull it out, and then it can set for a moment. It'll saturate that paper, and then at some point here you can just start to slide it right off. See that? Okay. Now I have to use my right because my band-aid on my thumb will make it difficult. So we get it in there, and it'll fight you sometimes like that. So what you can do, if you're real careful, you take you a knife, and if it pulls too much, start over, and I'll have to start over. The water helps it slide, obviously. And like I said, you don't want too much on there, but you can take you a little dab on your finger, about like that, and see, that'll help it lay. And then we want to just do our best of centering it on there. And then we want it to kind of fall in line with the odometer down here, so it's down on the right a little bit. So I'm just gonna try to correct that some, like that. And if you look at it that way, it's pretty square as far as that. Okay, so now there's a little bit of that water in there. It's kind of floating, as you could probably guess. So we're just kind of gently press on it, hopefully force out any of the water to the edge, and then the towel will absorb it, and that kind of squeegees it out as well. Be real gentle that way. That way you don't drag it back off and have to start over. So there's that one. Now we got one more. It'll be on the other side. Same identical decal, at least image. So I soaked it already. And then we'll just, sometimes they release pretty quick, and this one is no different. So what I'll do, on account of the last time, that paint is a little textured, so just take a little drip, put it in there, and give it some water to float on. And I accidentally let go of the paper, so I have to carefully pull it out like so. There we go. And then we'll just do the same thing. We'll center it, and it's a little resistant, but just enough, actually just perfect as far as movement. a little bit to the left, and I think we'll be good. There we go. And I'll go ahead and squeegee it. And it's just gentle pressing on it at the center and letting it squeeze out to the edge. And then dabbing it. Now, I could have taken these out, which they just sit in there, right? And I could have done it that way to show you, but you might be in a situation where you can't do that. You might be in the vehicle, and not necessarily this, because you have to have it out to remove the lens, okay? But in a generic way, you might have to work this way. So this is my advice on the best way to handle that. And it's just like that. So here we go. And then of course you'll put your lenses over top of that, and then your trim rings, and then fasten all that in. It'll have to set in there, and you'll see it through. And I'm not going to worry about clear coating this one to seal it on, because there's be absolutely hardly even any air that touches it, let alone fingers, because it'll be covered by the lens. So just a nice little touch, a little custom touch that looks stock. Alright, so we have the dash cluster, the instrument cluster in temporarily, just to see how it looks and to get it out of the way. And we also have the radio stuck in there for the moment. And the only thing that's really holding it is that plastic face bezel. If you remember, this van did not have a radio originally, so all the equipment to hold one in there is not there. So you can kind of see here, you see the back side of the radio, and then the defrost vent, I went ahead and took it back out. Well, when you look in the service manual, this is what would have been in there if it had a radio. So your speaker mounted, and this would have extended all the way across to the defrost vents, and they had a bracket off of this little recessed part between the studs on the defrost vent, and it went down to the back of the radio. Well, I thought I'd just mimic that, and it's a good place to anchor it. So here's the little recess right here, and it gives you enough room to put a bolt or something in there, because I don't have the original equipment. So I was looking through my stuff, and I have one of these bolts, which is a very shallow flat head and a stud, and I just got this old random nut, which is brass, and then a lock washer. And for a bracket, I have a bunch of these in the back for my parts storage. I have way too many of them, and so I took one of them and sized it up and bent the corner on it, and then drilled a hole, flattened this out, and so that will work as our bracket. This little gap right here is where the little screw on the side of the radio, so it'll extend from here and go up to that corner. So that's what I'm going to do there, and it'll properly secure this. You can see it probably move a little bit, so that'll secure that, and we shouldn't have any broken bezels that way. So we're going to get that into place, and then we can put the defrost vent back in. And we're just moving along here, and I figure I ought to show you how those decals look when they're in. So there they are. If we just get a nice dash pad on here, then we'll be set. This will come out again, it's just in there, a couple screws hold it in, and we'll get the wiring harness cleaned up and get it back in there, and we should be good and ready to go for the steering column and go forward from there. Alright, so we got our end result after we painted the bracket. You can see it right there. It screws into the side of the radio, and then it goes up and bolts into the little recess in the defrost vent area. So if we secure our light there, you can see it's pretty secure. And you can look here, and there's our bolt. Very secure. So the defrost vent should set down on this and not interfere or be sticking up or anything like that. And there we go. It's nice and flush, the way it should be. So pretty simple. Sometimes stuff like that can be kind of weird and crazy, but that was just a straight piece with a little bend on it, and it worked really good. So it's pretty solid.
We hope you've enjoyed the preceding short feature.